everybody. Welcome back to my channel. It's Harvard Lawyer Lee, and today I'm going to tell you about the case of Redonda Vogt. She's a nurse, let me correct that. She was a nurse at Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville, Tennessee. Now she's a felon convicted of criminal negligent homicide in the death of a patient. Was she treated fairly? I'm going to tell you today about the case, about what happened, why she was prosecuted, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the evidence, and then I'm going to give you my opinion about whether or not she should have been charged with criminal homicide in this particular case, and whether she should have been prosecuted. The case started on December 27, 2017. Redonda Vogt was working as a nurse. She'd been practicing about 3 years, and she was working at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. She was assigned to care for a 75-year-old patient, Charlene Murphy, who was about to have a PET scan. Ms. Murphy's doctor prescribed a sedative for her to take before the procedure started, and Vogt went to the electronic dispensing cabinet to pull out the drug for her. But the automated medication dispenser failed to dispense the drug, so Vogt overrode the machine and pulled out the drug she thought she needed. According to testimony at the trial, it was common for the nurses to override the dispenser, and Vanderbilt University Medical Center had authorized the nurses to do so. Well, unfortunately, Vogt grabbed the wrong drug. She grabbed a drug called Vercuronium. May have gotten that wrong. Vercuronium is a powerful paralyzing drug. It's so powerful that a number of states use it in the 3-drug protocol for executions by lethal injection. That's how powerful it is. Well, Vogt gave this powerful drug to Ms. Murphy, and tragically, she suffered irreversible brain injury. After a time, her family had to make the very difficult decision to take her off life support. Vanderbilt University Medical Center fired Vogt 1 week after she gave Murphy the wrong medication. Things then went quiet for about 10 months, but then they blew up again when the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services received an anonymous tip about what had happened. We know what happened here for a very unusual reason, which is Vogt readily admitted what had occurred. When the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation interviewed her, she told them, "I definitely should have paid more attention. I should have called the pharmacy. I shouldn't have overridden because it wasn't an emergency." Now, Vogt relied on something called just culture. Wikipedia defines that as the idea that mistakes are generally a product not just of one person and one person's mistake. They're the product of faulty organization cultures. So, in other words, mistakes are rarely the responsibility of just one person. Mistakes happen in context within an entire system. The idea is if you then fix the system, you can fix the problem. Firing the person, dealing with one person doesn't address the real problem. You need an institutional way of making it go away permanently to help people make fewer mistakes. This argument goes hand in hand with another legal principle that all 50 states and the District of Columbia have all recognized, and that's something called peer review privilege. The idea behind peer review privilege is that society really wants to encourage medical professionals to review problems that happen at hospitals or happen at medical institutions and to figure out ways to stop them from happening again. Medical professionals say, well, we're a lot more likely to do that. We're a lot more likely to hold a full and fair investigation if we're not worried that the investigation could be used against us in a lawsuit when we get sued by the patient or the patient's family. So under the peer review statutes, the state legislatures have made a decision that it's okay for a hospital or a medical review group to gather together a peer review board. They can conduct interviews, they can make findings, and all of that information is kept confidential. It's not allowed to be produced, and it's not admitted in a civil suit against the hospital or the medical facility. So the idea behind that is you really want doctors and members of the medical community to investigate when things go wrong. You want them to reprimand people when they screw up. You want them to fix problems. So without question, there are problems with the peer review system. Critics are quick to point out that it has some serious flaws because it can allow a medical group or a hospital to hide the truth and to avoid taking responsibility, even when they know they did something wrong. But state legislatures made the decision that that trade-off is worth it. That because they are more likely to honestly investigate, it's worth letting hospitals and medical groups talk honestly and openly and keeping it confidential. So using that same logic, what you might have expected here is that the state would have said, well, we want medical professionals like Vogt to admit their mistakes, so we will commend them. But instead, the state did something very unusual. It prosecuted Vogt, the nurse, for homicide, saying that her criminal negligence killed Miss Murphy. At the trial, a nurse educator from Vanderbilt testified for Vogt. Apparently, she explained the hospital had updated its electronic record system shortly before this incident. And something about the update was causing nurses to experience delays in getting drugs out of the automatic drug dispensing cabinets. The nurse educator said it was common for the nurses to override the system. We do know that Vanderbilt settled the case shortly after this incident with the family of Miss Murphy, but we don't know any of the details about that. According to medical experts, the hospital could have taken some other simple steps to make sure that Vogt could not dispense the wrong drug. For example, the dispenser could have been set up so that it would only allow an override when you were using certain drugs, not when you were using the very powerful, very dangerous drugs. Or it could have required an extra code be put in if those were pulled out. They could be put in a special location within the dispensing system. Something along those lines might have made a difference when Vogt went to pull out the medication to use. The hospital also could have had a procedure where they insisted that two nurses authenticate a medication before it's administered to a patient. And then finally, they could have had a scanner in the radiology department so that Vogt could have scanned Murphy's ID bracelet, and the system would have warned her that she was about to give Murphy a drug that wasn't prescribed for her. But the jury did not believe any of those factors. I don't know how many of those factors they heard, but they didn't believe whichever ones they heard protected Vogt. They found her guilty on 2 counts. So now we get to the question. My opinion, was it reasonable to hold Vogt criminally liable for Murphy's death? Now, the jury acquitted Vogt of reckless homicide, which would have been a more serious charge, but they found her guilty of criminally negligent homicide and impaired adult abuse. Now, under Tennessee Code Section 39-13-212, criminally negligent homicide is a Class E felony that involves criminally negligent conduct that results in a death. But that sort of begs the question because it uses the phrase again, what does that mean? What is criminal negligence? Well, if you go back to Section 39-11-106, it defines criminal negligence as a situation where a person did something even though they ought to have been aware that there was a substantial and unjustifiable risk that a bad result would occur. I'll say that again. They did something even though they ought to have been aware that there was a substantial and unjustifiable risk that a bad result would occur. Now, there are clearly circumstances where a nurse might be guilty of criminally negligent or even reckless homicide. I mean, take some strange situation. Let's say the nurse shoots up drugs over her lunch break and then comes in, pulls the wrong drug and dispenses it. That might be one example. Another might be if something very crazy happened, like something, just make up a hypothetical. The nurse throws all the patient files into a heap, randomly pulls one out from the middle, and just gives them the next drug on the list. But this case is not like those two situations. It's much more difficult because here some of the testimony suggested that Vogt was acting the way every other nurse was acting, and in a way that the hospital had sanctioned and approved. She was not engaging in weird outlier behavior. So now I'm going to give my opinion. It's obviously not legal advice. This is just my opinion. I don't represent any of these parties. But in my view, holding nurses criminally liable is a very serious and very dangerous precedent. On a societal level, we need nurses. But how many people are going to want to be nurses if they can be sent to jail if they make a mistake? Now remember, I'm not talking about willful, purposeful acts. I'm talking about criminal negligence, just negligence. And prosecuting nurses or doctors are going to be less likely to investigate their problems and to do something about them if criminal negligence is a potential end result. So think back to the reason the state legislatures passed those peer-reviewed privilege statutes. They wanted doctors and nurses to be honest. They wanted them to learn to improve patient care. But how many would do that if they thought they might go to jail? So we absolutely cannot discount the tragedy this event was for Charlene Murphy's family. And apparently they came and sat through the trial together. Without question, they lost someone they loved dearly, and it was a tragic circumstance. They deserve compensation, and this type of case is exactly the reason why we have civil medical malpractice cases. Compensation is not just a way to provide money for the people who were harmed. It's also a way of making sure that doctors and nurses are regularly held accountable through the insurance policies they have to purchase. Lawsuits are also a way of forcing hospitals and medical practices to adopt procedures and safeguards that prevent mistakes in the first place. In my view, holding medical professionals criminally liable, though, for the mistakes they make on the job is going to hamper our ability to get good people to serve as doctors and nurses. By all accounts, Redonda Vogt was a dedicated nurse who cared about her patients. She made a mistake with very tragic consequences. That's why medical professionals buy insurance for exactly this sort of case. So should Redonda Vogt go to jail for what she did? I'm a no. But let me know your opinion below. I'd be very interested to know what you think. If you liked the video, please press the like button and subscribe to my channel. I look forward to seeing you next time.